fantastical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that is right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of SNL Stories here on the SNL Network. My name is Jon Schneider from the SNL Network, and I am so excited to bring you a very special conversation that we are having today with a legendary member of the SNL band. So I'm excited to introduce our guest in just a moment. But first, it is my co-pilot on all the SNL Stories podcasts, the great James Stevens. James, how are you?
I am so excited to speak to our guest today because he's played with everybody. So this is going to be a real treat.
Yes, absolutely. And without further ado, it is my honor to introduce one of the original members of the Saturday Night Live band. It's also been very much a part of the house band for David Letterman for a long time, and obviously an integral part of the Blues Brothers, which we're going to get into because the Blues Brothers have a very special event coming up this weekend. It is the legendary Tom Bones Malone. Tom, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Of course. It is my pleasure. So, Tom, we have so many questions for you about your time at Saturday Night Live. This is SNL Stories, so we want to get some of those great stories about your time there and, of course, talk a little bit about the Blues Brothers. But, Tom, I have to start with asking you, how did you come to Saturday Night Live? Obviously, there's a lot of stories we've heard about, the cast and the crew and how everything started at the beginning. But as a member of the band, how did you end up joining the show?
Well, I moved to New York one day. I called a friend and I said, "Can I crash on your floor?" And he says, "Yes." So I moved up checked everything I needed on the plane and moved from Texas to New York. And I crashed on this guy's floor. And then he goes out on the road, back on the road with Woody Herman's band, and I inherit this cheap apartment. So my friend Hannibal Marvin Peterson calls me up from Texas. He's a black jazz trumpet player and a soul singer. And he says, "Can I come up and crash on your floor?" And I said, "Sure, come on up." So he immediately started working with Rahsaan Roland Kirk, the guy who plays three saxophones at the same time. And he also started playing with Gil Evans' orchestra. You may remember Gil Evans as being the best jazz arranger who arranged for Miles Davis, Sketches in Spain, Miles Ahead, Porgy and Bess, etc. Old bottle smooth man. And one night he says, "I got two gigs tonight." He says, "The one with Gil Evans doesn't pay anything." He says, "You want to sub for me on trumpet?" I said, "Sure." So I went down there and I met all these people that changed the rest of my life. Howard Johnson, David Sanborn, Dave Bargeron, Lou Soloff, Bruce Ditmas, on and on and on. Anyway, Howard Johnson and I hit it off. And when they put the band together for Saturday Night Live, they called Howard Johnson to put the horn section together. And so Howard liked me because I played tuba like he plays, and I played a whole bunch of different instruments like he plays. And so we became good friends, and he recommended me for the gig.
Yeah, it's just incredible to think back to those days. One question I do want to ask, and then I'll pass it over to James as well, is, when I go back and I watch the first few years of the show, and that's something that it seems like fans of all eras, all generations are going back and they're watching those first 5 years. They're on DVD now, so they're easily accessible. To me, one of the most fascinating parts is seeing how much the band is a part of almost every sketch. It's really incredible. It's so different than what we see now, and I love that was a part of the beginnings of the show, because it really felt like a bit of a variety show at first when things first started, where we have in the second episode, I think Paul Simon hosts the show. It's a very musical episode, and I just find music is so important to the beginnings of the show. Why do you think that was?
Well, if you view television from a historic viewpoint, you will find that all the bands in 1975 were big bands. Every TV show had a big band. You had Doc Severinsen's band on the Tonight Show, and every show had a big band. And this was a change of musical styles for house bands. And ever since Saturday Night Live started, all the new bands are not big bands anymore. Conan O'Brien, all the shows that started after Saturday Night Live followed our rock and roll band, soul band format. So that was a big change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I think the other thing, John, Tom, in those early years, yes, the band style, but also the extra spotlight, I think, that the house band got. Like, you're playing St. James Infirmary. You did the Cuban Pete with Desi. I mean, there were these cutaway from sketches. There's musical guests, but also special attention to the house band back in the day, which I just thought was super special.
Well, it was a new sound, and
Yeah.
I was just proud to be a big part of that as a musical arranger, and it was a kind of nice place to be as a New York studio musician, because people see you on TV and you're identified with a new style of music. You're not a Woody Herman or a Buddy Rich, or you're identified with rock and roll. Got long hair, beard, all hippied out, and it was a good place to be seen. And I started picking up studio work. Met all kinds of people on the show too. Do you remember a group called The Band from Woodstock? Okay,
Absolutely.
so they came on the show in the spring of '76, and they asked me to write some horn arrangements. The music director of the show asked me to write some horn arrangements. So I wrote 3 horn arrangements for the band, and I hit it off with all of them, and they took me on tour during the summer of '76. And I was in a movie called The Last Waltz on Thanksgiving 1976. After that, I played with a band called Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars, Paul Butterfield, Booker T. Jones, Dr. John, Lou Marini, Alan Rubin, Howard Johnson, and myself, Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper. It was really an all-star band. We made a couple of albums, did a few gigs, but it was a good place to put myself into circulation as a musician for other artists. We had 4 months off in the summer too at Saturday Night Live, so that was.
Well, in the first season, you actually had a couple of summer shows.
That's true.
They would do reruns all summer, but we basically had 4 months off, so it was kind of nice.
Hey, real quick, let me interject with one thing, because not related to the show or any show specifically. Here's what I find fascinating about Tom, for those of you that don't know. I mean, Tom Bones Malone, obviously Bones trombone. We know trombone, but Tom is like, tell us how does this happen? You really play like almost every instrument, sir. You are not normal in a very good way. Well,
I'm working on my own album. It's a one-man big band album. Typical song is 2 alto saxes, 2 tenor saxes, baritone sax, 4 trumpets, 3 trombones, and a bass trombone, piano, bass, and drums. And I do it at my house in my studio.
And you play it all.
A Neumann U87 microphone and Pro Tools 11. So I just crank it out one track at a time. No, I don't think anybody else does that.
No.
Yeah, it's really incredible. Can I ask, I'll
send you guys some stuff too if you want to hear it.
I would love to. Yeah, for sure.
Let's get in someplace.
Yeah. So I would love to know, Tom. I mean, during those first couple of years you're at the show, obviously you're talking about going or working with the band after a year of working at SNL. Was there anybody that you met at the show in the first year that just you couldn't believe? You're like, wow, I get to work with this person? Or was there a feeling of just surrealness as the show is growing and your status is growing as well?
Well, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray come to mind, because they were just super talented, and we all became friends.
Yeah, that's for sure. Do you have any interesting stories about any of the cast members and your experience working with them at the time?
Well, I may have told you the story before. 1978, our general production schedule was we did 3 shows and we had a week off. So during the week off in March 1978, Danny and John went to San Francisco for the week just to hang out, and they stayed up all night Saturday night with a harmonica player named Curtis Salgado. He was part of the Robert Cray Blues Band, and they stayed up all night listening to blues records. Now John was from Chicago, but he had no idea about Chicago blues. He was like a garage rock and roll drummer. But Dan Aykroyd was part of the blues scene in Toronto. He used to hang out at X-Ray McRae's club on Queen Street, and he was, he played harmonica, and he knew all about the history of blues. So airplane the next day, they're flying home from San Francisco, and they start Dan starts telling Jon about the history of blues in Chicago. You know, how people came up from the Delta in Mississippi, jumped on the train, went to Memphis, jumped on the train again, and went to Chicago. So on the plane, they started coming up with these characters that were sort of ne'er-do-well. Guy just gets out of jail, you know, and ne'er-do-well guys who wore sunglasses day and night, and they were orphans, had very little emotional response. So they're working on the characters. I was at the first meeting. The music director, Howard Shore, calls me and says, can you meet with Jon and Danny for an arrangement? 2 o'clock on Monday, 2 p.m. on Monday at Jon's office. And they explained the characters they were developing, and they wanted me to write an arrangement of, let's see, what was the name of the song?
Was it King Bee?
No, this is after King Bee. But they actually came up with these characters. It was a James Cotton song. So I wrote the arrangement. We did it for Lorne Michaels. Didn't make the show. Lorne shot us down. And so the next week, Jon and Danny are still excited about the Blues Brothers. So I did an arrangement of a song called "Hey Bartender," and so we rehearsed the Saturday Night Live band. We did it for Lorne Michaels. Lorne says, "Frankly, I don't see anything funny about the Blues Brothers." So week number 3, and Jon, Danny, Blues Brothers. Well, they said, "Well, if Lorne doesn't like it, we're wasting our time if we're not going to get on." So I agreed. After read through Wednesday about 3:15, Lorne comes out of read through and he says, "The show's 3 minutes short. What are we going to do?" Jon and Danny jumped on him. "Lorne, the Blues Brothers." So Lorne said, "We have nothing worthwhile to put in those 3 minutes. You guys might as well make fools of yourselves." He put us on, and I guess the rest is history.
Indeed, yeah, that is crazy story.
We had at a certain point, we did that a couple of times, and then Jon and Danny decided they wanted to form a band that was separate from the Blues Brothers. It was going to be the Blues Brothers band, and so they chose Lou Marini and myself, Paul Schaefer and Steve Jordan from the Saturday Night Live band, and I was going to be the horn arranger, and Jon said, "It's up to you if you need another horn." So I hired Alan Rubin, who was playing trumpet in the house band there at Saturday Night Live. And I recommended Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper because I had played with them with Levon Helm's band, and I knew they would fit the band. And at that point, the style of the band changed from just Chicago blues to Memphis rhythm and blues too. You know, they've sort of brought that music in that they had helped create in Memphis. Sam and Dave Soul Man, that was, it was not Chicago blues, that was Memphis soul music. And so we branched out into playing other stuff besides just Chicago blues. So one night while we were organizing the band, we were over at Jon's place at 60 Morton Street in Greenwich Village. And Jon says, "Well, now we have a Matt Guitar Murphy and a Donald Duck Dunn. So everybody has to have a middle name." I just immediately said, "Tom Bones Malone." It was a nickname I got in high school because I was tall and thin, you know, as skin and bones. So a friend called me Tom Bones Malone, and he doesn't even remember giving me the nickname, but I certainly credited him with that. Lou Marini's standing next to me, and he says, "How about Blue Lou Marini?" Perfect. Jon says, "If you can't come up with a name yourself, we'll make one up for you." So he made up Alan, Mr. Fabulous Rubin, and he made up Steve, the Colonel Cropper, et cetera, et cetera.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. Sorry, Jon. Yeah, I did not know that story. That's great.
Yeah, that's really cool. At the time, so the Blues Brothers, they're starting up, and this thing is coming together. Could you have ever imagined that the Blues Brothers would have gotten as big as they did, or was this something maybe at the beginning that was a little bit more fun, and then potentially this like professional venture that you were starting down?
Well, I had played with rock and roll bands since I was 14. I started playing tenor sax in a rock and roll band. Some kids came over to my house and like, "We're starting a band. You want to play?" In 1960. So I got out my trombone and they looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, "What's up?" And they said, "We don't have trombones in rock and roll bands." I said, "Well, I want to be in the band. I want to hang with the cats. I want to meet girls, So what do I have to do?" And they said, "You got to play saxophone." So my friend had an alto and a tenor sax with him that night, and he started showing me how to play saxophone. And I was motivated to learn how to play it. And we were doing gigs in a month. We worked out some arrangements that night, some horn arrangements. years. So that music, Blues Brothers style music, is a big part of my upbringing, and it was just a natural thing that. And yes, I'm surprised that it went as big as it did. I was just playing the music that I had already always played, and boom.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So before we go so far down the Blues Brothers, because we have several questions I think we want to address about Blues Brothers, but backing up to some SNL and some of the other cast, I just think about some of the other iconic musical moments, and just wondering, Tom, if you have any memories or stories, insight to share. Like some that come to mind are like King Tut, Candy Slice, Chevy's Girls was one that I always really loved. Anything from those days of putting those together, and just memories, I guess.
Candy Slice was a lot of fun. I was the bass player. I might have been shirtless, trying to remember, but yeah, and she played into it, and Bill Murray was pretending to be the record company executive, and that was really big fun. And when she went to Broadway, I was supposed to be the bass player on her Broadway show, and instead of doing her Broadway show, I did the movie The Blues Brothers. Paul Schaefer stayed with the Broadway show, but
Right.
she was just just full of energy, and she was like that 24/7 too. She, some people, they hit the stage and they act crazy, and then the rest of the time they're sort of normal people. But she was 24/7 funny, just like Martin Short. He never turns it off.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're talking about Gilda Live, right? That was at the Winter
Yes.
Garden there, right? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about another cast member that was really musically inclined and was actually sort of a musical guest on one of the episodes originally, which was Garrett Morris. Garrett seemed to always love to sing and have his moments where he just had this incredible voice. Do you have any memories of working on anything with Garrett?
Yes, I always remembered his voice. I mean, he was just a natural. He's a natural singer, and bang, we were good friends. That was a lot of fun. And King Tut, Steve Martin, that was a funny bit too. Lou Marini comes out of the coffin playing the sax with a gold face. Those were all stuff that I got to arrange and be involved in. Once again, I think I was sort of shirtless again, but
Yeah,
So
it was
I was going to ask. That's your arrangement then, right? Of King
yes.
Tut.
All those were my arrangement. The All-Nurse Band. Yeah.
That was another thing, John. Yeah, we had the All-Nurse Band. We had a couple different costume changes.
How come Howard Shore gets all the credit for that when Tom clearly wrote one of these arrangements? Yeah.
Well, he was the music director. I wrote the arrangements, and actually, I was the music director from '81 to '85. You
Right.
probably remember that as being Jim Belushi, Billy Crystal, Martin Short, Eddie Murphy. Episcopo. That was pretty much the period that I was the MD for. So, I got the big credit.
So when you came back for that as a music director, what was that experience like? You were in the band and you wrote charts, but also you had you put the band together and you had some say on musical guests, booking some acts, maybe.
Absolutely, and I worked with the writers. A lot of times the writers would come up with a routine for somebody. Like the White Guy Rap I was telling you about with Jim Belushi, or the Eddie Murphy's Hot Tub. You remember that?
Yeah, James Brown, of course.
Yeah,
James Brown.
Yeah.
I remember you guys have a good shot at the back of what was it? James Brown plays Annie. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was another stuff like that. I was always involved with, but it was always fun. And Eddie Murphy, just natural talent. Once again, somebody can sing and dance and just do anything. Amazing talent.
Have you had any interaction with him since you both left his show? Paths cross at all?
Oh, Eddie would come on Letterman once in a while, and we would have a moment. A lot of Dan Aykroyd would come on the show, and we would do something. Oh, Rocket 88 was the name of the song by James Cotton, the first Blues Brothers song. And we never recorded that song, actually. We never came back and recorded it. But when Dan Aykroyd came on Letterman, and we did Rocket 88 with him singing and playing harmonica.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so it was the beginning and the end of the Blues Brothers. Well, can't say it's the end of the Blues Brothers. We've got big plans this Friday.
Right, which we're going to talk about. It's coming up real soon. So I would love to know. I mean, for a lot of our younger listeners, if they go back and they watch, those few years, the Ebersole era, where you are the musical director, some
Yes.
of the hosts are a little bit understated compared to the first 5 years of the show, where I think there was a little bit of like, oh well, Lorne Michaels is gone, the cast is different, is SNL what it was? But it's really, if you go back and you watch, the musical guests of that era are absolutely fantastic, and it's great to hear that you had a lot to do with booking some of them, because like I go through the list of the those few seasons, and some of the acts are like some of the biggest names in the world that are there when Saturday Night Live wasn't necessarily considered to be at its peak. And I have to say, all credit to you, Tom.
Right. Well, yeah, there were a lot of big production moments. Oh my goodness. So who was the girl that had the record called Physical?
That would be Olivia Newton-John.
Oh, Olivia Newton-John, yeah.
Yeah, Olivia
recently
Newton-John,
passed. Yeah.
sadly just passed away. But so I saw on the schedule the talent coordinator. Oh, Olivia Newton-John's going to be on the show next week. Oh my goodness! What time does the band load in? She doesn't have a band. It's a studio album, and Physical's on the top of the charts. And so I had to put 3 songs together from scratch. Staying up all night. But she was a delight to work with. So talented, great singer, just a gracious person. And that was Robert Plant and the Honey Drippers. Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. He did a solo album. Oh, they're going to be on the show next week. Well, what time does the band load in? They don't have a band. It was a studio album. So I had to put that together too. And I put together a hot band for him. That was really, really fun to work with him. Legendary. Who didn't like Led Zeppelin?
Also, there was Stevie Wonder too, which to me was like an episode that I'll always remember. Do you remember anything about Stevie coming in?
Stevie Wonder, what a talent! I worked with Stevie Wonder when he was 16 in Albuquerque and El Paso, back when I was in college, and he kind of took me in as a friend for some reason. He said at the time he was just recording the songs that were written by the Motown staff writers. He says, "I'm writing my own songs, man. You want to check it out?" And he had a nice cassette recorder and some good headphones. So he let me listen to this music, and it just blew my mind. I said, "Man, this is so great, man. Who played on this?" He says, "I played everything: bass, piano, drums, organ, guitar, all the vocals." And it hit something inside me. Well, if he can do it, I can do it. So I'm now doing my one-man band. But he was really fun to work with. I worked with him several times in my career on television since he was 16, and he always remembers me. "Hey Stevie, it's Tom, the trumpet player from Albuquerque." And he said, great, how you been? Blah blah blah. Last time, Letterman, 2014, I did an arrangement of "I Wish" for Stevie, and I ran into him in the elevator, and I said, "Stevie, it's Tom, the trumpet player from Albuquerque." And he says, "It's nice to see you."
Oh my gosh.
That's great.
You've got a great memory. I remember that from last time we spoke about just the years and dates and places and all that, which is really just amazing to catalog all that. Another cast member
too. I played on Funky President. I played on quite a few records that his production company did in the early '70s in New York. Fred Wesley arranged a lot of that stuff. He was an incredible presence, and it was a pleasure to work with him too.
What a career! You made me think about another cast member during the time that you were music director, because she had just a great voice, and there were a few moments that the show gave her to sort of be featured front and center. Was Christine Ebersole. Do you have a?
Oh yes! Oh my goodness! Yeah, I made a demo. I was trying to produce her, and she made a hit on Broadway, and she was gone. But yeah, I did what was it? "Single Bars and Single Women" was the name of the song. Somebody at the show wrote it, so I produced a demo of that, and Dolly Parton grabbed it.
Yes,
he had a hit on the song. Yeah, I actually made the demo that made that happen. So yeah, Christine Ebersole, what an amazing talent. I ran into her at Mark Shaman's birthday party a couple of years ago too, and she's just still singing great and looking great and amazing.
And Mark, I think, piano player and writer on the show, but after you were there, right?
I gave Mark his first job in television. I hired him to be my rehearsal piano player in 1981.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, John, Mark is who does the Sweeney Sisters in the background.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I do know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a big part of that.
And I helped him arrange the movie Sister Act. The chase scene in the casino is my arrangement.
Yeah. This is Sweeney Sisters, the 12th greatest SNL characters of all time, according to the SNL community. So, but Tom, so I did tell, we have some patrons, which are some of our biggest supporters, the podcast listeners. I told them that I was going to be talking to you today, and
Yes.
I did get a couple questions in from them. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you a couple questions. This one is from our friend Curly Joe, who would like to know if you were part of coming up with the original theme of Saturday Night Live, and do you have any input on how they would change the theme song each of the first few years of the show?
Well, I did some arranging on the original theme, and when I became the musical director, I wrote my own theme. I actually composed my own theme that ran those 4 years, but I tried to keep it in the same genre, as the original stuff. And it was basically Lou Marini playing a solo over a chord progression. So I kind of kept that going, and I think we kept the original closing theme. The one that
The
Howard
waltz
was credited with, but it was actually from a piece of church music. It was just the chord progression from a Methodist or Episcopal gospel song, and they just played the chords, and Lou Marini improvised a melody on top of that.
That's cool. This one is from our friend Ike Moore, who wants to know, do you have a personal favorite sketch in the history of Saturday Night Live that would be your favorite?
Well, I'd have to say the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
You set me up.
I figured as much. Do you still watch the show? Is there any time you get to catch it? Or, since you weren't there anymore, like past 85?
Oh yeah, I rarely watch television at all. I like being on the shows, but as far as sitting around the house watching TV, I really go in the studio and play some music.
That's fair.
Record some music or just do something else. I love being on the shows. I was only on 4,500 TV shows during my career.
Right, exactly.
I only wrote around 2,700 arrangements for TV. Well, one time. Now you think, arranging music must be easy. Well, no. The problem is that there's always a deadline that you're confronted with. One time, I'm at Letterman's show, and Paul Schaefer grabs me after the show, and he says, "Renee Fleming's going to do the top 10 tomorrow. We need 13 opera excerpts by 11 in the morning." And he has, here's a CD with the 11 opera excerpts, and here's her recent CD. So figure out what key she should sing them in. Now, the way it's supposed to be done is that you get together with the piano and the singer, and you figure out what key is going to be the best one for her. So then Paul says, "Okay, Bones, how are we going to pull this off?" I said, "I'll play flute. Aaron, our sax player, will play oboe. We'll hire a clarinet player and a French horn player, and you'll play the string parts." Because I can arrange for orchestra and opera and all that. And so I stayed up all night, got it done. Showed up at rehearsal 11 in the morning. One song's in the wrong key. Transposed it to my computer, printed it out in Paul's office right next door to the rehearsal place. And all night I stayed up. I was thinking to myself, Renee Fleming, she's going to be a pain to work with. She's going to be like a diva. She turned out to be delightful, great sense of humor, easy to work with, and you can see that on YouTube. Do David Letterman top 10 Renee Fleming.
That's incredible. So you mentioned the fast pace, the deadlines. I mean, is that the adrenaline push of the television that kept it fun? I guess just the ride, right?
Keeps it from being boring.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing more deadly than the deadline of a live TV show. There's no, I didn't quite finish it. Maybe next week. No, you got it. So I got used to doing things quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do have a couple more questions from our listeners. So, if Tom, if you don't mind, I'll ask you those. This has been a big question. Would you ever see David Letterman hosting Saturday Night Live? Do you think it could happen? Should it happen?
I like that idea. I would love to see that. Dave is actually a very, very nice guy. He was always sort of distant while we were doing the show. In his own words, he says, I'm either doing a show or I'm thinking about doing a show. And so, when he would go from the office building to the studio, they would clear the hallways, clear the elevators. He didn't have to run into people and say, how are you doing? Have a nice day or any of that. It's just, because he's concentrating on what he had to do. But in the long run, very nice guy. Took very good care of me and the people in the band. And have only good things to say about David Letterman. I'd love to see him on Saturday Night Live. That'd be a great payoff. He's got the big Santa Claus beard now. He hated to shave. So he would come in on Mondays and, would have 3 or 4 days growth. So now he doesn't have to shave.
Yeah, he's like a former Yankee. Like now he gets to let the beard out. So Tom, if Dave ever hosted SNL, would we see you back with the SNL band just for that one night? Do you think we can get that tap?
I'd be there. I'd be there right there. Yeah, maybe Schaefer would show up. It'd be fun.
That'd be amazing.
Maybe
do you think
throw the David Letterman band back together for a one shot? That would be, maybe we could be the guest music on that show. I mean, that would really work.
That would be very cool.
And Collins and Anton Fig and all the people.
All right, SNL producers, are you listening? That could be fun. Have you ever been back to the show at all, either for one of the anniversary shows or been in the building?
I went to the let's see, was it 25th or 35th or 40th or something? I went to I think it was the 25th, and it was quite a Garrett Morris was still around, and Chevy Chase showed up, and it was just it was really nice to see everybody again, and the whole history of the whole thing. It was just great.
So coming up, we've got this weekend. It's an inaugural, the first of many, hopefully, a Blues Brothers conference at Joliet Penitentiary, where the opening scene for the Blues Brothers film takes place. And you are going to be there. Tell us a little bit about that and how this came to be, Tom.
Well, I heard about this event from Judy Belushi. And she was saying, well, maybe you want to come. And so I contacted Dan Aykroyd, and well, can I sit in with the band? Sure. So we're flying in, and it's the Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi, and they have their own band of guys from L.A. And one of them is an old friend of mine from school from more than 50 years ago. And so I hooked up with him, and I'm going to play with the band again. And I'm so excited about this. And I'm also excited about the fact that Joliet prison is no longer a prison. It's been decommissioned. And
sure,
instead of tearing the place apart, they're turning it into a Blues Brothers museum, because it's, the most famous thing about Joliet is that beginning of the movie. It's Joliet, Jake, and Elwood Blues. Elwood picks him up in the car that he traded a microphone for, an old cop car. That reminds me of another story. Dan Aykroyd, after the Blues Brothers movie was still around New York, he says, Bones, if you ever need a car, let me know. I was just renting cars. I had a country house and I had a loft in the city, and I would drive up to the house in 35 acres up in Putnam County on the weekend. I just rent cars and write it off. And so one weekend I forgot to make a reservation and I needed a car. So Dan, do you have a car I can borrow? He says, go to the Morton Street garage and tell them you want the police car. It was a police car from the movie. It had wires hanging out at the top because they'd torn off the speakers, and it had cardboard boxes taped over the badges on the side of the vehicle, so it wouldn't be illegal. You can't just drive one that has identification on it. So my kids loved it, and we're driving up to the country. And the car would not go 55. You're going around, cruising around 50. You just push it a little bit, and suddenly the car just jumps and it was, it was a pursuit engine with a linkage to the 4-barrel carburetor. And I was tailed by the cops a couple of times, and you could see them calling it in, but apparently the car was clean, and so they backed off. And anyway, we had a lot of fun with the car that weekend.
You needed a car, so you ended up driving that car from the film. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's a great story. So just for all the listeners who don't know anything about the Blues Brothers Con, so that is taking place this weekend, August 19th and 20th in Joliet, Illinois. So tickets, I believe, are still available for the event. So if you'd like to go out and get a ticket, you can come see Tom Malone yourself. So that'll be fun to be there. And also Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi performing. There's some other blues bands that are going to be there. So it seems like it's a really incredible event, especially for anybody in the SNL community who wants to go and celebrate the Blues Brothers.
I think you go to JolietJail.com or go to Blues Brothers Con, CON, to find out more information about it. But it's, they're actually saving the prison and making it into a museum for the Blues Brothers. They have reconstructed the interior of Bob's Country Bunker. They have recreated the scene on Maxwell Street, where John Lee Hooker performs, and several other things. I haven't been there myself, but I'm really looking forward to going there and seeing all the stuff. We're saving this for eternity. It's a nonprofit organization, as far as I understand, that Judy and Dan have set up, and so we're keeping the Blues Brothers alive after 42 years. It's still people still tell me it's the best movie they ever saw.
Yeah, it's one of the best for sure, and I think obviously keeping the memory of John alive, through the Blues Brothers is just really important for anybody who loved him from either the movie or from SNL. It's just it's really, really great.
I'm sure the band will be playing all your favorite Blues Brothers songs, and there's a whole bunch of interviews and all kinds of activities for the whole weekend. It's like all day, every day. So really looking forward to hanging out and seeing people from my past and bringing the music back alive.
Sure.
That is incredible. And you have your career is far-reaching. You've played and worked with so many folks, both in the musical endeavor and comedy. This has been a pleasure for sure.
Oh yeah,
Tom, thank you so much for doing this. I can't thank you enough. Is there anything that you would like to say to the SNL community? We have fans from all eras of the show, people who have watched the show when you were there. Is there anything else that you would like to tell them?
Well, just enjoy life, enjoy music, and enjoy comedy. I learned so much about how comedy goes together and how comedy and music goes together when I was there. So just enjoy the show. You see talent leave the show, and you see new talent come in. I mean, that's been the springboard for so many huge actors and actresses, that have been amazingly successful, in other TV shows or movies or stuff like that. I'm thinking maybe Bill Murray might have been the biggest person to come out, in the long run. And I played with him at the Kennedy Center in D.C. when he got the Mark Twain Comedy Award. And the next year, I was there in the house band to bring David Letterman into the Mark Twain Award. So it's just a great show, and it continues to be great.
For sure. Well, it's an absolute honor getting to speak to you. So thrilled to get to hear some of the stories of your time at SNL and the rest of your incredible career. Tom, I'm just going to wrap up the show just for a couple minutes, if you don't mind. And of course, we will do one last plug for the Blues Brothers Con. So, if you're checking out this SNL Stories in the middle of August, thanks for checking us out over the summer. We have an incredible patron podcast series where we're counting down the greatest SNL characters of all time. You'll have to keep watching to see if the Blues Brothers do make the list or not. So check out that series as we get the fan results from everybody in the SNL community. And of course, if you do love the Blues Brothers, there is no better weekend to come out and celebrate them this weekend in Joliet. So Tom, would you mind just telling the listeners one last time where they can get those tickets this weekend?
Well, it's JolietJail.com/BluesBrothersCon, CON. It's going to be an exciting weekend with all kinds of stuff going on. And we're immortalizing the prison in Joliet in a very positive way. I can't wait to be there, and hope all you fans show up.
Absolutely. Well, James, thank you for joining us today on SNL Stories. Always a pleasure to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
for
having
sure.
me
You
on,
can-
guys. It's a pleasure to hang
Of
with you
course.
guys.
Of course. And if you want to catch any of our shows here at the SNL Network, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, really wherever you listen to podcasts, and also find us on all social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram to catch up with everything we are doing. We may have some content from this weekend at the Blues Brothers Cons as we're promoting that for the weekend. So looking forward to that.
And thank you to the sponsors of the SNL Network for keeping it alive, keeping it on.
Yes, I appreciate that as well, Tom. All right, for Tom Bones Malone, James P. Stevens Jr., and myself, Jon Schneider from the SNL Network, we will see you next time, everybody.